Equity Mates, from our mates at Spaceship. Investing made easy.
Welcome to another week of Equity Mates. Always excited to be here. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Great to be back for another week. We've got a big week coming up. Big week in markets.
Yep.
Big week for stocks. Big week for you.
Stocks. Big week for me.
Turning 30.
Yes, the big 3-0. Plenty of people out there have done it, so it's not
Yes.
yeah, so it's not too daunting. But yeah, exciting week at Equity Mates, the big 30th. And look, we'll update you next week on how it goes.
Yeah, nice. Looking forward to it. Well, speaking of updating, we have had a couple of big weeks on the podcast, the sister content platform to this TV show. And we've had a real focus on Asia recently. We've spoken to some big experts who have got us really excited for the opportunity in Asia. We've touched on Europe a little bit on this show. We've spoken to some experts, but we want to talk about some of the things we've learned over the past couple of weeks, because if there are equity mates out there that are really interested in investing in overseas markets, and for the last decade and a half have, focusing on the US has been a great trade.
Yeah.
But there's a lot out there, and Asia, there is some fascinating companies. There's a fascinating IPO pipeline. And some unicorns, some startups valued at well over $1 billion that are worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. The size of some of these companies that we're going to be going through today is just staggering compared to the markets here in Australia. To your point, Ren, we have spoken with two experts who are focusing their investment opportunities in Asia. We had Mary Manning, who's a portfolio manager at Elliston Capital. Now, it was an incredible interview.
Well, before we talk about the interview, we speak to some people with incredible CVs on the podcast, on this show. If you're watching AusBiz all day, you're speaking to some incredible people. How is this for CV though? So she did an MBA at Harvard. She worked for George Soros. Then she worked for Howard Marks at Oaktree. Then did a PhD at Sydney Uni. And now is the portfolio manager of 3 funds at Elliston.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and it certainly showed in what she was talking about. Very switched on, amazing interview. We also then chatted with David Halpert over in Singapore. He's the co-founder and CIO at Prince Street Fund. He's had 30 years in capital markets and founded Prince Street in 2001. And has travelled to over 100 emerging economies and markets in the past 10 years. So has a really good grasp on what markets actually look like on the ground in a lot of these countries that are providing some pretty significant investment opportunities from an emerging point of view. So between the two of them, plenty to dissect. So we may as well kick it off with Mary.
Yeah, so and then we'll talk about some of the companies that really excited us from those 2 interviews at the end. But let's start with the thematics and what we learned. And I think from Mary, the big takeaway for me was the opportunities coming down the pike in Asia. The IPO pipeline is hot.
Very hot.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, she said she has never seen a pipeline this hot in more than 20 years. So, look, it's exciting, I guess, as an investor. We love when companies IPO. We think about what's going on here in Australia. We've had some pretty, a record, I guess, amount of IPOs. But the IPOs coming through, particularly in India and Indonesia, are very exciting. No surprises that it's incredibly tech heavy.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening all around the world, it's tech, and a lot of these large companies over in India and Indonesia are starting to compete with some of the big, big guys.
Give us some names.
Sure. JD Health, an online pharmacy. So you may have
not
heard of
in
JD.
India or Indonesia, though.
Not in India or
China.
Indonesia. China. Yeah, you may have heard of JD.com.
Yes.
Yeah, so part of JD.com, it's a huge online pharmacy group over there, subsidiary. It has IPO'd very recently to much fanfare, so check that out. Kaisho, one that I hadn't heard of. And
I'm glad you said that one because I wouldn't know how to pronounce it.
That is not how I typed it in, but luckily I got it. Kaisho is one of the rivals to TikTok, a big social platform. Now, it has IPO'd, but this gives you an idea of the scale. Its pre-IPO round was $4 billion
Wow.
with a minimum ticket size of 300 million. So
Wow.
gives you an idea of, if you think about some of the companies that are doing pre-IPO here in Australia at the moment, for example, Superhero did a pre-IPO at 25 million, I think. And
No, I think they raised 25 million.
Oh,
but anyway,
raised,
yeah.
whatever it was. But these are doing pre-IPO at 4 billion, so pretty significant. So we're not talking small caps coming down the pipeline.
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah.
companies that are 50 to 100 billion.
Well, to put that in context, that's the market cap of Zip.
Yeah, well, there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
There you go. And so pretty incredible size. I think the message from Mary, though, tech heavy, very exciting, a lot of opportunity coming down the pipeline.
A couple of companies we'll expand on a little bit later, but are also coming down that IPO pipeline. Flipkart in India, currently owned by Walmart, but going to go public. Gojek in Indonesia, going to merge with Indonesia's largest e-commerce player, Tokopedia. May go public through a SPAC, may go public in its own right. Jio, going to be divested from Reliance, big Indian telco. Facebook and Google have invested in it. Expected to go public in 2021. In Singapore, Grab is going public in perhaps the largest SPAC deal ever. Definitely Southeast Asia's largest SPAC deal. Just a lot of tech-focused companies going public.
Yeah. Another one of my takeaways from Mary before we jump into David was that really Asia is way too big to ignore, but also, not always relying on the, market cap weighted ETFs as a way to get exposure. Try and come up with a bit more of a concentrated portfolio if you can.
Yeah. I mean,
which is difficult, given that not all brokers give access directly to these countries, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, more and more are, or should. Come on, brokers. But yeah, if you're going a market cap weighted Asian index, you're going heavy into Tencent, Alibaba, which are all
exactly.
great companies, but
Yeah.
it's there's a lot of other opportunity outside of China.
Yeah.
I think was a real takeaway from Mary.
yeah.
Which leads us on to David Halpert. So Mary's interview is out now. You can check it out, the full 45 minutes on the Equity Mates podcast. David, we haven't released yet. We're releasing that this week. But we wanted to talk about it because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So David was based in New York. He's now based in Singapore, and he has this this concept, this theme that he expects to play out, especially in Asia, but he's also seeing it play out in South America and in Africa. And he calls it digital decolonization. And basically his thesis is that the US tech companies have colonized the world. That wherever you go, ex-China, I guess, it's Facebook, it's Google, it's Microsoft, they are truly global. But what we're seeing is a lot of local companies fight back and really take market share in local markets. So in South America, Mercado Libre has really taken it to Amazon and really pushing in that e-commerce space. But he's particularly interested in Southeast Asia and companies like Gojek and Tokopedia in Indonesia, Grab in Singapore and Southeast Asia, a bunch of others are really, I guess, taking the fight to these big American tech companies.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing to watch unfolding, and opportunities will arise. I mean, I guess we saw Uber get pushed out of a lot of Asia, got pushed out of China. And yeah, his thesis is that's going to keep happening.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about. I mean, the size of these companies is just incredible. And, who would have thought that these big tech companies can get pushed out of markets? But
well, yeah, this was the thing. Like, we talk about US tech companies and we talk about a global network effect, that everyone in the world is using the same platform or the same software. And that creates like global interoperability in some ways if everyone's using Microsoft Office or everyone's using Facebook or the same payment system. But we are seeing a lot of these, I guess, Asian local companies create their own like domestic or local network effects that are quite powerful.
yeah, even more powerful in some respects. Like you look at what WeChat and all those, they're doing over in China and how they can just absolutely command a market and have so many offshoots and different ways to engage and bring in customers. It's pretty incredible. David also spoke about the Indo-Australia Free Trade Agreement and how it deserves more attention.
This one snuck under the radar of a lot of people, signed right at the start of COVID, like February 2020.
Got buried.
Yeah, but some really interesting things that David spoke to us about. So Indonesia are trying to become the leader in electric cars, which I was surprised by. They want to make the most EV batteries in the world. And they basically, the free trade agreement from Indonesia's perspective allows Indonesian-made cars to be treated like Australian-made cars in the Australian market. And so there's about 18 million cars on the road in Indonesia, according to David, and about the same in Australia. So it basically doubles Indonesian car makers' addressable market. So that's really exciting for them. For Australians, it allows service businesses to be treated as local businesses in the Indonesian market. David's example that he kept going back to was that Australian architects would basically be treated the same as Indonesian architects. Not sure why architects, but that was an example that he kept going back to. So for Australia, that means that this massive country right to our north, we can now export a lot more services to it. So David expects this free trade agreement to have a really profound impact on both economies, and as investors, it's something that we should be watching.
Absolutely. So to close out, we've got 4 companies that we have already mentioned
briefly
throughout this year, but these are ones that really got us excited through both the conversations that we have had with Mary and David. And to kick it off, we have Flipkart over in India. It hasn't IPO'd yet, but will be IPOing later this year. And it has a pretty significant, it is owned by Walmart.
Yeah, owned by Walmart. And in a big battle with Amazon for e-commerce supremacy in Indonesia. Amazon's spending a lot of, India. Amazon's spending a lot of money in India. Flipkart, I guess is similarly spending a lot of money, but that's a really interesting battle to watch unfold. And Walmart's owned it for a couple of years now.
For a number of years. And Mary's kind of commentary on this was, you think about all these big companies that have the ability to sort of put their money anywhere in the world, and they're all turning their attention onto India at the moment. So something's happening in India.
Well, speaking of big companies putting their money in India, Reliance, which is the biggest Indian stock by market cap, has a subsidiary, Jio, which is a Indian telco, and Alphabet and Facebook have both invested in it. Reliance is talking about divesting Jio and making it its own publicly listed company, probably 22 or 23.
In the tens of billions.
But it's going to be a big company in its own right.
Massive, It's just, getting your head around the numbers is pretty phenomenal. Back to Indo, you can't go past Gojek if you're thinking about companies that excite us. I even remember being over in Bali and seeing all these little motorbikes scooting around, and this was all part of Gojek.
So basically, for people that are unfamiliar with Gojek, think of Uber, but rather than ride-sharing cars, you're ride-sharing bikes.
Motorbikes. Mopeds. It is merging with another big company over there, Tokopedia.
Indonesia's largest e-commerce business.
Yeah, so a massive merge going on there. They're both Indonesia's most valuable startups. So it's going to be creating a pretty massive company. And likely to go public or after its merger in 2022 or 2023, or via a SPAC. No surprises there.
And then the last company that we wanted to touch on that got us pretty excited was Grab. Now, in the Equity Mates, I can't even remember where, maybe on the podcast, I think in our Thought Starters email, we've featured a lot of content around super apps and this emerging theme that was, the first cab off the rank was really Tencent's WeChat, which is really, a super app is, there's a payments processing sort of spine, but then really the beauty of a super app is that all these other apps are built on top of it. And WeChat is this amazing app in China where businesses like Meituan are just built specifically for WeChat. And it creates an incredibly powerful super app. Grab, based in Singapore but servicing Southeast Asia, started in transport, went to food delivery, now has mobile payments. there's a lot of talk that Grab could become another super app where companies build apps on top of it. And it's going public later this year via a SPAC. So that's one for me that is really interesting.
Yeah, pretty fascinating space. If you would like more information on anything that we've spoken about today, we do have those podcasts available, and you can head to our feed, Equity Mates Investing Podcast, to check out Mary Manning. David will be coming out later this week, so a must listen if you're interested in investing in Asia, and specifically India and Indonesia. But that does bring us to the end of our episode today. You can find more information at equitymates.com. But otherwise, we've got a big week coming up, as always, Ren.
Big week.
Yes.
We are going to be breaking down some companies that don't get as much attention in the US as some of the major tech companies. We've got Watchlist Wednesday, where we'll be featuring 3 Australian companies, including Zip, one of your favorites.
Yeah, maybe.
And yeah, just breaking down more of the world of investing. So see you tomorrow and the rest of the week.
See you then.
Equity Mates, from our mates at Spaceship. Investing made easy.